Hello, my name is Amalia Carpenter, and this is my The Lion King myth presentation. So, starting off, let's talk about The Lion King's plotline. Very first, Simba is born and everyone across Pride Land celebrates. Then, Scar kills Mufasa and convinces Simba that it is his fault, so he runs away, which leaves Scar in charge. Next, Simba meets Timon and Pumbaa, who introduce the idea of a carefree life, which is Hakuna Matata. Then Rafiki finds Simba and reminds him through Mufasa's spirit that he needs to return to fulfill his destiny. So Simba goes back to the Pride Lands to find them completely ruined and confronts Scar about the murder of Mufasa. Scar dies and Simba takes back his place as king, which brings back balance to the Pride Lands. Now, let's kind of talk about a comparison with another myth, and one of these is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Some of those similarities are there are princes whose kings were killed by their uncles, and then the uncles take the throne, and then they have this haunting presence of their fathers as ghost figures. And then they both end up in exile. Obviously, Simba's is by choice, Hamlet's is not. But then at the end, they are both able to return as the rightful heir to the throne. Now, the next one that I was able to find, we're going to look a little bit farther back. And this is the myth of Sundiata Keita. Now, he was born into a royal family, but he was exiled again. But this time it was because of some deformities that he had. One of his family members took the throne, and he became a powerful warrior on his own, and then was able to take back his rightful place as king. And then, similar to Simba, he was able to be a just ruler who brings peace back to his country, which is really great. But why is it important to find these comparisons? Well, here's why it's important. They're all examples of Joseph Campbell's monomyth. But through the retelling of this story in different ways, it reaches a bigger audience. Like through The Lion King, it's even children, which then shows the relevance in many different situations and generations. And they're dealing with big values such as leadership, responsibility, justice, things like that. And then going into the next question of why are myths important in general? Well, myths in general are so important because they're giving meaning to these life cycles. The whole circle of life that Lion King is talking about, it's giving meaning to so many different aspects about this, but it's also giving meaning to events and emotions, as well as great insight into human behavior, relationships, and especially grand questions. So, speaking of grand questions, let's talk about some of these. That are especially answered in The Lion King. Number 1, who am I? This is a very central theme to Simba's character arc. He thinks about his identity, and he thinks that all of his identity is just about being the future king, and that is all he talks about, which we hear in one of his songs. He is very, very proud of that. But when Mufasa dies, he feels guilt and ends up having to abandon his quote-unquote identity. So this is very much the refusal of the call stage that we learn about in the hero's journey. He forgets who he is. However, then we get to hear Rafiki remind him that his identity is actually shaped by his choices, and he gets to decide who he can be. So that's the way that this answers, is that our choices decide who we are. And then the second question, what is my true purpose? For Simba, his purpose is to take place as king, but the biggest thing that he learns is that he has to earn that role, and he has to face difficulties and rise above them to be the king he is meant to be. So rather than there being one role for every single person, yes, some people aren't born into royalty, but he's learning, and we can learn through this, that we get to earn that role that we want to become. Number 3, what does my life mean? Simba's life is not only meaningful because of his experience, but also the people's lives that he impacts. He shows that meaning comes from living with values and responsibilities. Yes, he has that period of self-exile, but then he embraces responsibility and love, which is what gives him a meaningful life. The last question is, how does life and death shape our world? This movie teaches in such a perfect way that death is not the very end, but it is something that can teach. Mufasa's death is what begins Simba's hero's journey, but then he also learns that death is what nourishes new life, and when one great leader dies, it gives an opportunity for a new leader where they can honor the death of their loved ones. So those are some of the grand questions that are answered. And then this final slide is just those citations. So thank you.